There are no income limits, but if the income of an institutionalized individual is too high, Medicaid would not make sense because they would be able to self-pay at the facility. However, we should talk about the minimum monthly maintenance needs allowance for the spouse living at home, which is also called the community spouse. The community spouse is entitled to $2,643. We can round the number up to $2,650 for my example on how the minimum monthly maintenance needs allowance does work for a community spouse. So if the institutionalized spouse has an income of $3,000 and the community spouse has an income of $1,000, then the community spouse can take $1,650 to bring their monthly income up from the $1,000 up to that $2,650. This would in effect reduce the institutionalized spouse's income of $3,000 down to $1,350 to be able to allow the community spouse to have the minimum monthly maintenance needs allowance. There is an asset limit for both the community spouse and the institutionalized spouse. The community spouse can keep half of the assets up to $157,920. For simplicity, we can round that up to $158,000. The institutionalized spouse can only keep $2,000. So the way that works is when one of the spouses enters a long-term care facility, Medicaid will combine all assets, whether that's joint or separate property, and regardless of whether or not there's a prenuptial agreement. They will add these assets together and they will divide them in half, with the community spouse being able to keep the $158,000 and the institutionalized spouse being able to keep only $2,000. The $158,000 is not a guarantee. So if the couple, when combining their assets together, only have $200,000, the community spouse can only keep $100,000, the institutionalized spouse keeps $2,000. Or if they have a combined total of $400,000, in that case, the community spouse can only keep the $158,000. They would have to spend the remainder of the $200,000 that they're allotted from their half down to the $158,000, and the institutionalized spouse would have to spend their $200,000 down to $2,000. We can give you guidance on how to wisely spend down your assets. The minimum monthly maintenance needs allowance and the community spouse resource allowance does typically change each year. They continually increase from what we're seeing. The minimum monthly maintenance needs allowance just increased from $2,555 up to the $2,643. The most common myth about Medicaid is that Medicaid will take all of your assets, which is not true. Medicaid will not take your assets. It's just that your assets have to be spent down to $2,000 before you qualify for Medicaid. If you have any questions about the income or asset limits for Medicaid qualification purposes, then feel free to give us a call, schedule an appointment with us here at ProvenLaw, and we're happy to help.